If you told me 6 months ago that I'd be scraping paint off a neighbor's porch for $20 an hour while my wife shopped for designer handbags, I would have laughed in your face. But life has a way of humbling you, doesn't it? Losing my job wasn't just a financial blow, it was a blow to my pride. I'd worked my way up at a mid-sized tech company, earning a decent salary, respect from my peers, and a comfortable life for Sarah and me. When the layoffs came, Sarah seemed supportive at first. "Don't stress," she told me, cupping my face in her hands. "You'll bounce back. You always do." But months passed, and while I scrambled for freelance gigs, her attitude started to change. It wasn't in your face, but I felt it. The way she'd roll her eyes when I talked about the odd jobs I'd picked up. The way she stopped asking how my day went. Meanwhile, Sarah's career was taking off. She worked for a marketing firm that handled big accounts, and her boss, Greg, seemed to adore her. She was suddenly spending late nights at the office, attending work dinners, and flying out for retreats. I told myself it was just the nature of her job, but there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Our arguments became more frequent, mostly over money. "We can't keep living like nothing's changed," I said one night as she tossed another Amazon package onto the kitchen counter. "Ben, I make enough to cover it," she shot back, her voice tinged with annoyance. "Do you want me to stop living just because you're figuring things out?" I didn't want to argue, so I let it slide. But the spending didn't. A new purse here, a diamond bracelet there. She'd wave it off, saying things like, "It was on sale," or "It's a gift from work." At first, I believed her. After all, Sarah had always been honest with me, or so I thought. It wasn't until I stumbled across a dinner receipt that things started to click. I'd been looking for my car keys and found the slip tucked in the back pocket of her coat. The restaurant was one of the priciest in town, the kind of place where even the cheapest wine costs more than my weekly grocery bill. For 2 diners. "Who'd you go to dinner with last week?" I asked her casually that evening, holding up the receipt as she walked into the kitchen. Her reaction was a split second too slow. "Oh, that," she said with a laugh that sounded a little too rehearsed. "Greg took the team out to celebrate landing the Pruitt account. I told you about it, remember?" No, she hadn't. But I nodded, letting it go for the moment. Still, a seed of doubt was planted. One Friday evening, Sarah came home with a brand new handbag, a sleek, designer piece that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage. "Nice bag," I commented, trying to sound neutral. "Do you like it?" "Greg got it for me," she said nonchalantly. "He's such a thoughtful boss." "Your boss buys you bags now?" I asked, unable to hide my skepticism. "It's not like that," she said, her tone defensive. "It was a reward for all the extra hours I've been putting in." I nodded again but didn't say much. Something felt off, though. I mean, what kind of boss buys his employee a designer bag? In the weeks that followed, the signs kept piling up. There was the perfume I'd never seen before sitting on her dresser. The diamond bracelet she claimed was a work perk. The hotel charge on our shared credit card. I noticed other things, too. Sarah had started dressing differently. Her usual jeans and blouses were replaced by fitted dresses and heels, even on days when she wasn't supposed to be meeting clients. She started going to the gym religiously, something she hadn't cared about in years. "Just trying to stay healthy," she'd say when I asked about it. All of it felt like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. One afternoon, while cleaning up the living room, I found a crumpled receipt under the couch cushion. It was from another expensive restaurant, dated the same night Sarah claimed she'd been at a team meeting. The signature at the bottom wasn't hers, it was Greg's. I stared at the receipt for a long time, my hands shaking. I wanted to confront her right then, but a part of me was scared. Scared of what I'd find if I kept pulling at the thread. Our once loving relationship felt more like a business partnership now. We barely talked about anything that wasn't logistical: bills, groceries, whose turn it was to pick up takeout. The physical intimacy between us had dwindled to nothing, too. "It's just stress," Sarah would say whenever I tried to bring it up. "Work is demanding, and I'm exhausted." "It's not you, Ben." But it felt like it was me. Like I was the problem. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. I just finished mowing the lawn and came inside to grab a drink. Sarah's phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me look. The text preview read, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Miss the way you taste. Greg." I froze. My throat went dry, and my hands started to shake. Sarah walked in a moment later, completely oblivious. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she noticed my expression. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile and slipping out of the kitchen. But inside, I was boiling. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That text from Greg wasn't just a red flag, it was the smoking gun. But confronting Sarah wasn't as easy as I'd imagined. Part of me hoped there was some explanation, something that would make it all make sense without shattering the life we'd built together. The other part of me knew better. The opportunity came on a quiet Wednesday evening. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. I walked in and leaned against the counter, acting casual. "Hey," I said. "Quick question. What's with the hotel charge last month?" Her fingers froze for a split second before she looked up, her face a perfect mask of confusion. "What hotel charge?" "On the credit card. The one for the Grand Lux downtown," I said, keeping my voice light. "Oh, that," she said, laughing nervously. "It was for work. Greg had us all stay there after the retreat. You know, to team build." She even added air quotes. I nodded slowly, pretending to buy it. "Team building, huh?" "Yeah," she said, a little too quickly. "Why do you even care about this stuff anymore? It's not like I'm spending your money." The jab stung more than it should have. I forced a smile and shrugged. "Just curious, that's all." She gave me a tight smile and went back to her phone, sipping her wine like she hadn't just jabbed a knife into my gut. That night, while Sarah slept, I grabbed her laptop from the kitchen. She rarely used it anymore, favoring her phone, but I knew she hadn't changed her password in years. It took me less than 5 minutes to log in. I started with her email. For a while, it was just work stuff, campaign updates, client briefs, the occasional forwarded meme from coworkers. Then I found it. A folder labeled Personal. Inside was a series of emails between Sarah and Greg. They started out innocently enough, compliments on her work, casual jokes, but quickly escalated. By the time I got to the most recent exchanges, my hands were shaking. "Greg, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." "Sarah, same. I wish I could see you more often without sneaking around." "Greg, soon. Just say the word, and I'll take care of everything." I sat there in the dim glow of the laptop, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. There it was, in black and white. Proof that the woman I'd built my life with was having an affair. But it wasn't enough to just know. I needed her to admit it. The next evening, after Sarah had finished dinner and was settling on the couch, I dropped the printed emails onto the coffee table in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, frowning as she picked up the stack. "You tell me," I said, crossing my arms. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and I saw her face change. First confusion, then shock, and finally a calculated calm. She set the papers down and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Where did you get these? Does it matter?" I shot back. Sarah sighed, leaning back against the couch. "Greg and I are just friends. This is harmless. You're blowing it out of proportion." "Friends?" I said, my voice rising. Friends don't write things like "I can't stop thinking about you." Friends don't spend nights in luxury hotels together. So stop lying to me, Sarah. Her composure cracked for a moment, and she leaned forward, her voice sharp. You're being paranoid, Ben. Those emails don't mean anything. I stared at her, my anger simmering. I want the truth, Sarah. Not excuses, not gaslighting. The truth. She stood up abruptly, pacing the room. Fine, she snapped, throwing her hands in the air. You want the truth? Here it is, you lost your job, Ben. You've been moping around, doing nothing, while I've been busting my ass to keep this house afloat. I needed someone who could actually provide for me. Her words hit like a gut punch. So this is my fault? I said, my voice trembling. You cheated because I lost my job. It's not just about the job, she said, her tone defiant. It's about everything. You've been so pathetic lately. No ambition, no drive. Greg. Greg made me feel alive again. I stared at her, my mind racing. Do you even hear yourself right now? You're blaming me for your affair. Do you have any idea how selfish that sounds? She folded her arms, her expression hard. I don't expect you to understand. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt heavy with everything unsaid, with years of trust and love unraveling right before my eyes. Finally, I broke the silence. You know what, Sarah? You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how the woman I married, the woman I loved, could turn into this. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. I turned toward the door, my voice cold. I'm done. You want Greg? Fine. Go be with him. But don't expect me to stick around and watch you destroy everything we built together. As I walked out of the room, I heard her call after me. Ben, wait. But I didn't wait. Not this time. That night, I slept in the guest room, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Part of me wanted to pack my bags and leave right then. Another part of me wanted to stay and fight, to make her see what she'd thrown away. But one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Not yet. That night in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with every possible thought. Had I failed as a husband? Was I not enough for her? The woman I had loved and trusted with every part of me had betrayed me, and the worst part was that she seemed to think it was justified. I replayed Sarah's words over and over in my head, you lost your job, Ben. Greg made me feel alive. Each repetition cut deeper than the last. By the time the sun crept through the blinds, I felt like a shell of myself. My heart was shattered, my pride in tatters. I didn't even recognize the man I'd become. The next few days were a blur. Sarah stayed out of my way, which was probably for the best. She was spending even more time at work now, and I didn't have the energy to confront her about where she was really going. I spent most of my time replaying every moment of our marriage in my head, looking for the signs I had missed. Had she been unhappy for years, and I was just too blind to see it? Or had I truly failed her after losing my job? The guilt started to eat away at me. Maybe if I'd found a new job sooner or been more attentive, she wouldn't have turned to Greg. Maybe this was my fault. It wasn't until the weekend that I finally reached out to someone. I called my older brother, Mike, who lived a few hours away. Mike had always been the tough one in our family, the kind of guy who didn't let anyone push him around. When I told him what had happened, he didn't mince words. She cheated on you, Mike said bluntly. This isn't about your job, Ben. This is about her being selfish and entitled. But I let her down, I argued, my voice cracking. I couldn't even keep a steady job. Bullshit, he snapped. Do you think any decent person would react like that? People lose jobs all the time. If she really loved you, she would have stuck by you. Instead, she chose to run off with some rich prick because it was easier for her. His words hit me hard, but he wasn't finished. Listen to me, Ben. You're a good guy, but you've been letting her walk all over you. And now she thinks she can get away with it because you're too nice to fight back. Don't let her and that guy make you feel like less of a man. After I hung up the phone, I sat in the guest room for a long time, staring at the floor. Mike's words had struck a nerve. I had spent so much time blaming myself, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, that I hadn't stopped to consider the truth. Sarah's choices were hers alone. She had betrayed me. She had lied to me. And she had the audacity to blame me for it. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made for her over the years, the late nights, the compromises, the times I'd put her needs above my own. And this was how she repaid me. By sneaking around with her boss and acting like I was the problem. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of resolve. I spent the next few days gathering my thoughts. Every time Sarah came home, she acted like nothing had happened, as if we were in some weird, unspoken truce. She'd make small talk, ask if I'd eaten, and then retreat to the bedroom or leave again. But I wasn't falling for her act anymore. While she was gone, I started digging. I went through our finances, looking for any discrepancies. Sure enough, there were charges I couldn't explain, luxury purchases, dinners, even hotel stays that she had conveniently forgotten to mention. I printed everything out, adding it to the pile of evidence I'd already gathered. If Sarah thought she could get away with this, she had another thing coming. By midweek, I felt like a new man. I wasn't the pathetic, unemployed husband Sarah had painted me as. I was someone who deserved respect, and I wasn't going to let her keep trampling all over me. That evening, when Sarah came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised to see me sitting there, the stack of papers in my lap. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "Ben, I'm tired," she said, sighing dramatically. "Can this wait?" "No, it can't." She hesitated but finally sat down across from me, her expression guarded. "What's this about?" she asked, gesturing to the papers. I handed her the stack, watching as her face changed while she flipped through the pages. Bank statements, receipts, emails, all of it laid bare. "I know everything, Sarah," I said. "The affair. The money you've been spending. All of it." She looked up at me, her face pale. "Ben, Save it," I interrupted. "I've heard enough excuses. You made your choices, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. Sarah could spin her lies all she wanted, but the truth was staring her in the face. As I stood up and walked away, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I had spent too long living in her shadow, trying to hold on to a marriage that she had already broken. Now, it was time to fight back. I've always been the type of guy who believed in taking the high road, but when I sat in my guest room staring at the stack of evidence against Sarah and Greg, the thought of doing nothing made my blood boil. She had humiliated me, betrayed me, and then had the nerve to blame me for it. Greg wasn't any better, a smug boss who thought his wealth made him untouchable. For days, I wrestled with my emotions. Part of me wanted to throw everything out into the open, confront Greg at his office, or humiliate Sarah in front of her friends. But the calmer, more calculating part of me whispered, "Play the long game." While Sarah was at work, I pored over every detail of the evidence I'd gathered. The receipts, emails, and bank statements painted a damning picture. But one thing stood out: many of Sarah's expensive purchases were billed to Greg's corporate card. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She had claimed the designer bag, diamond bracelet, and even a spa weekend were gifts from Greg, but they weren't gifts, they were transactions. He had been using company money to fund their affair. I took screenshots of every suspicious charge I found, cross-referencing them with Sarah's receipts. When I was done, I had a folder so airtight it would make a lawyer drool. It didn't take much to find Greg's company's HR contact information. I created a new email account, attached the evidence, and composed a short, professional message. Subject: confidential evidence of misconduct. To whom it may concern. I am writing to report financial misconduct involving one of your employees, Greg Anderson. Attached are detailed documents showing Greg's misuse of company funds for personal expenses, including those associated with his affair with an employee under his supervision, Sarah McDonald. This behavior violates ethical and financial policies, and I believe it warrants immediate investigation. A concerned party. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the send button. Once I did this, there was no turning back. But then I thought about the lies, the betrayal, the way Sarah had laughed off her deceit. My hesitation vanished. Send. The wheels turned faster than I expected. Within days, I noticed Sarah acting off. She came home looking distracted, her phone constantly buzzing with emails and calls she ignored. One evening, I overheard her talking to Greg in hushed tones. "I don't understand how they found out," she hissed. "It's not like we were obvious." I smiled to myself. Obvious or not, the evidence spoke for itself. 2 weeks later, Greg was fired. The fallout wasn't limited to him. HR had called Sarah in for questioning, and although they didn't terminate her, she was placed on probation and removed from all major accounts. When she came home that night, she was seething. "You won't believe what happened at work today," she spat, throwing her bag onto the couch. "Oh?" I asked, feigning innocence. "What happened?" "Greg got fired. Someone sent HR a bunch of fake accusations about him and us." She looked at me suspiciously, but I kept my face neutral. "That's crazy," I said, shaking my head. "Who would do such a thing?" She didn't answer, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. The night I kicked Sarah out will always stick with me. She came home late, again, her face pale and drawn. I waited until she had set her things down before I spoke. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the living room with my arms crossed. "Not now, Ben," she said wearily. "I've had the worst day." "I'm filing for divorce," I interrupted. Her head snapped up, and for a moment, she looked genuinely stunned. "What?" "You heard me," I said, pulling out the manila folder containing all the evidence I'd gathered. "You've been cheating on me for months, Sarah. You've been lying, spending money that wasn't yours, and now you're dragging me into your mess. I'm done." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "And don't bother denying it," I said, tossing the folder onto the coffee table. "Everything's in there. The emails, the receipts, even Greg's corporate charges. You've humiliated me for the last time." Her expression hardened. "You can't prove anything." I laughed bitterly. "I don't need to. The evidence speaks for itself, and it's already with my lawyer. So pack your things, Sarah. You're leaving tonight." Her face twisted with anger, but she knew she had no leverage. Without another word, she stormed upstairs. Kicking Sarah out was cathartic, but there was one more loose end to tie up, Greg's wife. I had discovered her name and address while digging into Greg's background, and I knew she deserved to know the truth. I mailed her a copy of the folder with a note. To Mrs. Anderson. I thought you should know what your husband has been up to. Enclosed is evidence of Greg's affair with my wife and his misuse of company funds. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserve the truth. A week later, I heard through the grapevine that Greg's wife had filed for divorce. The man who thought he could have it all now had nothing. The divorce process with Sarah wasn't easy, but the evidence I'd gathered gave me the upper hand. My lawyer ensured I got a favorable settlement, including keeping the house and avoiding alimony payments. As I watched Sarah drive away for the last time, I felt a strange sense of peace. She had taken so much from me, my trust, my pride, my sense of security, but she hadn't broken me. Now, I could finally focus on rebuilding my life. When I look back on everything that's happened over the past few months, it still feels surreal. Losing my job, discovering Sarah's betrayal, exposing Greg, it all happened so fast, but it also taught me lessons I'll carry for the rest of my life. For a while, I felt like my world was falling apart. But sitting here now, in my new apartment, with a fresh start ahead of me, I realize losing my job was the best thing that ever happened to me. It wasn't just the catalyst for everything that followed, it was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. After Sarah moved out, the house felt eerily quiet. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd grown so used to the chaos of our marriage, the arguments, the lies, the constant tension, that the silence felt unnatural. But slowly, I started to fill that silence with things that mattered. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, people I'd unintentionally pushed away while trying to make my marriage work. I joined a gym, partly to clear my head and partly to prove to myself that I could reclaim my confidence. And then, there was the job hunt. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. The tech industry is competitive, and starting over in your mid-30s feels like climbing a mountain with weights strapped to your ankles. But I kept at it, polishing my resume, networking, and applying to every opportunity that came my way. Eventually, persistence paid off. I landed a position at a startup in the city. It's not as glamorous as my old job, but the work is rewarding, and the team is great. More importantly, it's a fresh start, a chance to rebuild not just my career, but my sense of self-worth. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's to trust your gut. Looking back, the signs were there from the beginning. Sarah's late nights, the unexplained purchases, the emotional distance, all of it was pointing to a problem I didn't want to see. I ignored my instincts because I didn't want to believe the worst. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she'd never betray me like that. But the truth is, when someone shows you who they are, you have to believe them. Another lesson I learned is to value yourself. For years, I put Sarah's happiness above my own, thinking that's what a good husband does. But relationships are a two-way street. If one person is constantly taking and the other is constantly giving, it's only a matter of time before the balance tips too far. I let Sarah's needs overshadow mine, and in doing so, I lost sight of who I was. But not anymore. To anyone reading this who's been betrayed, let me tell you something, it's not your fault. I know it's easy to blame yourself, to think you could have done something differently. But the truth is, cheating is a choice. It's a reflection of the person who did it, not the person they did it to. Don't tolerate disrespect. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. And most importantly, don't be afraid to walk away from a situation that's hurting you. It won't be easy. There will be days when you feel like the pain will never go away, when the anger and sadness threaten to swallow you whole. But I promise you, it gets better. You get better. Today, I'm in a much better place. I've got a new job, new friends, and a new perspective on life. I even started picking up hobbies I'd abandoned years ago, hiking, photography, and learning to cook something other than boxed mac and cheese. The divorce was finalized last month. I walked away with my dignity, my finances mostly intact, and a newfound sense of clarity about what I want, and what I deserve. As for Sarah, I heard through mutual friends that things didn't work out with Greg. Apparently, he's having a rough time adjusting to life after being fired and divorced. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little satisfaction hearing that. Karma has a funny way of catching up with people. But I don't dwell on them anymore. They're part of my past, and that's where they'll stay. If you're reading this and going through something similar, know that you're not alone. I was in the darkest place of my life not long ago, and now I'm excited about the future. Life doesn't always go the way we plan, but sometimes, the detours lead us to places we never expected, places that are better than we could have imagined. So here's to starting over. Here's to taking control of your life and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. And here's to trusting that, no matter how bad things seem, brighter days are always ahead.